Welcome. I'm Tracy Poisner, and this is the Undeletable Dad podcast, a show for divorced or separated fathers. My job here is to guide you out of the thickets of parental alienation and to lead you across the threshold of the impossible to a real dimension where your children are securely held in the orbit of your love and influence. It's not a dream, it's reality, just waiting for you to breathe life into it. You're invited to work on a deeper level with me through our courses, group programs, or private mentorship by visiting undeletabledad.com. Matt Sweetwood has a story that nobody could make up. I won't give it away because he wrote it all down in a book called Leader of the Pack: How a Single Dad of 5 Led His Kids, His Business, and Himself from Disaster to Success. The jacket notes say of Matt that he unexpectedly ended up the only parent of 5 small children ranging in age from 18 months to 8 years old. That's just the beginning. You have no idea. It's not possible how many of your struggles you'll recognize in this story. And he says things out loud that will make you both cringe and want to cry with relief to know that you're not the only one. Please do yourself a favor and pop this book onto your phone or reader. This is a guy you'll be glad to know. Here is Matt to dive into what I think are the juiciest bits of his story. Matt, thank you for being here.
Trace, my pleasure to be here with you.
We were just saying that we had a few false starts with having to move our appointments, but I just wanted to say about reading your book that it did only take me a couple of days because it's a page turner, or in this day and age, a screen swiper, or whatever you want to say. But
did you read it digitally or paper?
On my phone.
Yeah. So when I ask somebody for it, like someone wants a copy of the book or they send it to them, what I find interesting is that 9 out of 10 people want the paper copy. You and me, by the way, we're both modern humans because, I mean, a paper book, those shelves used to be filled with books. I donated like all of them.
Yeah.
I can't.
I still have 2 shelves about as the size of yours that are packed with books, and that's down from 7 or 8 of those that I've given away. And who's got room for that anymore?
That's right. Exactly right. But most people, I will tell you, when they request my book, they request a hard copy of the book. Most people not reading digital, which is interesting. And what always happens, everybody always says the same thing about the book, is they're like, oh, a memoir about your life? Boy, that sounds exciting. Sure, I'm going to read that book. Anything, Matt, anything you say. And everybody says the same thing. I thought I was just going to read one chapter to be polite, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I've had people tell me they didn't sleep the night. Yeah. They read the book crying through the night, this kind of thing.
I really couldn't stop. It is very well written, on top of being an incredibly compelling story. You have a compelling story. That's some crazy shit that happened to you.
Yeah, I would say CS all the way. Exactly.
It is incredibly rare, in my experience, to encounter someone who could be that open and vulnerable about something that guys don't want to talk about, which is being an abused husband, how severe the emotional and psychological abuse can be, what that looks like.
So the decision to do that actually was a business decision. I mean, obviously there's an emotional and a vulnerability, and let's have a vulnerable moment together. Okay, so let's be vulnerable together. But realistically, I realized that if I was going to write a book about a middle-aged white guy's journey through parenthood and all the things that happen, you had to have some edge to it. And the edge was basically illuminating all of the stupid, bad mistakes that I made, the continuous putting myself in bad situations, the emotional vulnerability and stuff. Because when I was composing that book and I was going through it, there's no support from men. Nobody cares what guys go through. So for me to write that, I originally wrote it with the intention that single dads would read it, but that's not who reads it. No. It's moms who read the book.
Really, eh?
Moms and young women. Young women and moms are the number one reader for the book. even though the book is, it's really about, you know, how a guy gets through really a bad divorce and having
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
handle this. Ultimately, it's a spiritual journey, right? The book is just really about, you know, your sort of spiritual journey, how you mature in life. And I think that women enjoy it for the same reason that you mentioned it, which is for to see a man's raw emotion being sort of poured into the book. The book's a little embarrassing too. I mean, if you think about it, I'm over the embarrassment because I
Yeah,
talk
but
about things that are like,
that's why I'm saying it's rare for somebody to be open to saying things about himself that are embarrassing, like that after being treated like so abominably by your first wife for such a long time, that even after she was essentially gone, how much you would have hoped that she would come back, even though you're like, when you read it, you go, no, really?
no,
Like,
no,
even then,
really,
you
that's
still
right.
wanted, like,
So one of the really good, I have 180 something 5-star reviews on this book on Amazon. It was a
mm.
bestseller for a while. It was actually kind of cool, ahead of all the big guys on
Tell everybody
Amazon.
the title of your book, just while we're on it.
Who came up with it?
No, just say it out loud so
Oh, it's
that,
the leader of the pack, how a
yeah,
single dad of five led his kids, his business, and himself from disaster to success. And
yeah,
it's right, that's the cover,
that,
right?
oh, yeah,
Right.
right.
Right. It's not just a self-portrait there.
Yeah.
Though I have self-portraits all over. It's okay. When I was 18, I had all pretty girls all over the place. When you get to my age, you just put
Yeah.
pictures. That's it, better. um, so I think that the book really is about what a lot of people have said in the reviews, which is, I think one of the most interesting reviews, and I think it happened a few times, is when someone said, "You made the best case I've ever seen why people stay in abusive relationships."
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you've heard this callously said to women, like,
Yeah.
he hit you, leave.
Yeah.
Like, why are you there? He hit you.
Yeah.
And unless you've been in that circumstance, unless you understand it,
Yeah.
it's extremely difficult. The psychological pressure that you come under as a result of it is very hard to explain unless you've been through it.
Yeah.
And it's more than just, let's say, a financial tie. I know in the case, particularly for women, a lot of times women can't escape difficult relationships because they're not financially independent. This is a big factor. I'm not being sexist when I say this. I'm
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
being factual about it. But it's not really the ultimate hold. In a way,
No,
the financial reason is just another excuse to stay there.
that's right.
It makes it more difficult to leave, obviously, but people stay because of the emotional conditioning that you go through when you're abused.
That's it. I once heard somebody talk about having given a speech or maybe multiple speeches in the like Women's Correctional Institute,
Right?
and a speech about abuse, you know, domestic abuse, and saying to the audience, hold up your hand if you knew that this guy was going to be an abuser on the from the first date. And like almost everyone in the room, right? Like
Right.
it
So
is
it's
the
a conditioning,
conditioning
right? It's a
from
conditioning.
before, from long before.
So one of the things that I do now is I coach people. I coach a lot of
Wonderful.
executives. I actually coach, believe it or not, I coach a rabbi, I coach a famous yogi, I coach a very well-known architect, a designer. I have all these people that I actually coach. And one of the interesting things is that people just, that's the right way to say this. Um, People don't understand the effect that this kind of thing has on you, the pressure that it puts on you, and the way it conditions you to stay there. And to break free from it is very, very difficult. It is very difficult. And in fact, it becomes a learned response. And this is particularly true. I've coached more men, about 3-to-1 men to women.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked to men and they're like, I'm like, why are you with this woman? It's like, she's hot. And they don't mean hot so much in the looks, it may be looks,
Yeah.
but they get excited by the up and the down and by the abuse and by the thing. And then
Yeah.
when you meet a normal woman, it's
Yeah.
like
It's
she's
boring.
boring.
Yeah.
You don't have attraction. So in order to avoid this perpetual process of being with abusive people, you actually have to break what attracts you. This is
Yeah.
like a fundamental aspect. Otherwise, you will just keep repeating over and over and over again
Yeah.
what you've done because you're not attracted to it. You meet somebody in the wild and you're like, boring.
Well,
And
and
they're normal.
you know this. You can speak from experience because in your book you talk about doing it again.
Exactly right.
You
Exactly
would
right.
think, what on earth would compel you to go back into such a similar situation?
Right, because you don't realize it. You don't realize because it's not exactly the same.
Yeah.
It just on the below, deep down, it's the
Yeah.
same, but on the surface, it looks very
It
different
looks very different.
because what you're attracted to is not really on the surface.
Yeah.
It's really down below and you don't even realize it.
It hurts, right? That's why we call it shadow.
Yeah, that's
Because
right.
it's lurking.
And I'm sure, your audience listening, there are many, most can identify with this. And the other thing that I have discovered over time and coaching people and so on is that the amount of narcissism and the amount of abuse is growing.
Yeah.
People are not getting kinder over time. This is unfortunate.
Yeah.
And so the likelihood of ending up with someone like this grows as relationships become more difficult to obtain and so on.
Exactly. And the likelihood of ending up with someone who has children from a previous relationship grows because that's just happening. Like as we get older, everyone is already coming to a relationship with some previous baggage.
That's right. And it's very complicated now because we all live a lot longer.
Yep.
If we know what we're doing, we stay healthier longer. I mean, I'm like 83. No, I'm joking. Joking.
You look very good.
Yeah, I look very good. So we live longer. You have relationships for longer. You can actually have bigger age differences between relationships. Those are acceptable now.
Yep.
Much more acceptable. So relationships are very complex, in today's world. A lot of women complain today too that there are no men anymore. I mean, I've heard this. I don't know if you've heard this, but I hear this
Yeah.
over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Over and over again. But that's another sort of result of kind of what happened to me in marriage. Is that marriage has become a little bit of a punishment for men in certain instances, or men view it like this.
Yeah.
And the internet has sort of warned them of this, and the availability of multiple inventory and all of these things make relationships very complex.
Yeah. But at the base of it, I think, as you were just saying, that the mistake that you make in a relationship can always be tied back to some kind of negative or limiting idea you have about yourself and what you deserve and how you're going to settle for somebody who you think is your equal or out of your league in some way because of feeling bad about yourself in some way that you don't know. Like, you're not walking around saying, these are the ways that I feel bad about myself. It's hiding, like you said. It's like way deep down there, and you don't notice that that's the thing that's pulling your strings. That's what's making your decisions for you. And if you're not feeling that like you're a 10 out of 10, you can't go out into the dating world without attracting trouble.
That's right. Exactly. That's exactly right. Self-esteem obviously is both attractive and it's necessary to actually find a proper relationship, of course.
It is. Even the word narcissism that we, have such a negative connotation to, but there is a healthy degree of narcissism that every person needs to have. You can't function without it. Otherwise, you're just walking from one bad situation into another.
I mean, no ego is bad, and too much ego is bad. And like
Exactly.
everything else in life,
Yeah.
I mean, the middle ground is always is almost always the place to operate in. So, okay, we talked about all of this. What are we supposed to talk about today? I don't know. We got off on.
Well, this is already good. This is already good. I do want everyone to read your book because it's such a fantastic story, and because you do have 5 kids that you managed to raise.
At least 5. These are the 5 that I wrote about in the book. There could be more.
There could be more.
But I never got the bill from them. So
yeah,
I'm good.
yeah. There's one other thing about the book that really stood out to me that I just want to explore with you a little bit, if I may, because I talk about this in my work, in my coaching with dads in particular. Um, and I think it's something that's so not well understood or resisted or whatever, but the idea of the apology. And there's a moment in the book where you apologize to your kids.
That's right.
And it's so powerful for me. Um, and I just talk about it, because I don't need to say what I think. I want to know more about what you think.
It's funny you mentioned that because I've had this discussion relatively recently with my kids as
Mm,
they're now adults.
yeah.
And so there comes a point when, kids are innocent. They didn't ask for any of the things that happened to them until, okay, if we're Jewish, when they're 13, but even 13,
Yeah.
we know that, right? I mean, the brains don't form until like
Yeah.
36 anyway. So,
Yeah.
um, um, so there comes a point when you have to accept responsibility for their journey, particularly if it didn't go very well. And I think apologizing to them for not being, I don't want to say the best you can, but for allowing certain things to happen that you could have prevented, or not being there, or being too self-absorbed, or too involved with yourself, or feeling sorry for yourself, or whatever the case was. I think it was a transitional moment, a transformative moment
Absolutely.
for me and my kids, where they realized that, it's not that I just felt bad for them, but I acknowledged my part in what went wrong.
Yeah.
And the book is really about that. It's not, I don't want anybody to get the impression that, I don't want to give away too much of the book, but,
Yeah.
it's a story where mom walks away. I mean, I can just say that
Yeah.
without that. And I'm left with these 5 kids to take care of. And I can sit there and bash the mother all day long, but that's really unproductive. There comes a point when you have to self-reflect and say, I married her. I stayed there. I
Exactly.
allowed a lot of the things that happen. And I wasn't always the best parent that one could
Yeah.
possibly be. And I'm human too. And I can apologize for this and try to do better. And I talk about it even today with my kids who are in their 20s and 30s today, when, they'll sometimes shoot back at me, right? They'll be like,
Yeah.
well, this happened. And I'm like, well, there's 2 aspects to that, right? First of all, look, I'm sorry. I've said I'm sorry that happened. And number 2, we're 20 years later. It's about time that you guys got over it.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. It's time, you're adults. You have to at least make a point where, you get over this. I've had moments, I'm going to have a perfectly honest moment, since I positioned myself as an honest purveyor of life
Mhm.
circumstances, where I've dated women, and my kids are adults, right? They're not
Yeah.
out of the house.
Yeah.
My kids are all, I don't want to spoil the book, but good enough.
Yeah.
They're all independent and they're all doing their thing and whatever they're doing, and I'm dating somebody and they're like not nice to her.
Yeah.
Why don't you think that I know why they're not being nice? There's nothing to
Yeah.
do with her, right? It
Yeah.
creates a lot of conflict. And I'm like, kids, you can't do that. Don't you want your dad to be happy? Don't you want
Yeah.
your dad to have somebody in his life? Don't you want this? Well, you can't be trusted with women, is the
Yeah.
response. Right.
Yeah.
And then we have these sort of discussions. Look, I'm sorry. We all make mistakes in life. We all do this, but you you can't, it's
Yeah.
very hard for them.
Yeah.
So I've had this. Basically almost anybody I've dated since
Wow.
some of the last 15 years
Yeah.
has been a problem, right? But
Wow.
intellectually they understand. They want their. I'm like, look, I'm going to get old. You guys want to have to change my diaper, or do you want me to marry somebody to change my diaper? Okay,
Yeah.
which is it?
Yeah.
You pick. You pick.
Which one of you is planning to do it?
Which one of you is planning to do it? Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Don't you want me to be happy, right?
Yeah.
So, obviously I understand the circumstance. And this all centers around that sort of being sorry and acknowledging. I mean, I feel pretty good about my book. My book is is not a throw the blame book. In the end, I
Oh,
accept
not
all
at
the
all.
blame.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's what makes it so powerful. And it's not even, I don't even like to talk about accepting blame. It's that it's such a sovereign, tone of your book. It rings a tone of ownership that maybe that's what I'm talking about, that we don't often hear.
Yeah,
People
well,
do,
today's
you know,
world, people
complaining
don't
and
like to
blaming.
accept responsibility for
No,
what happens.
no. For responsibility for, you know, it's easy enough to say, you know, I'm responsible for my own happiness. Like that's easy to do. But like I'm responsible for my own unhappiness, that's not so easy for people to say, you
You
know,
know, there
I
comes a
did this to
point when you're like,
myself.
okay, I chose to marry this person. I chose
That's
to
right.
stay with them.
Yeah.
I chose, I've said this, I said it before. I chose to do all of this stuff. I
Yeah.
understand the psychological pressure and I understand financial circumstance and I understand all of this, but ultimately these are decisions that we made. We didn't have to do it. So
Yeah.
you have to take responsibility for that. And you also have to acknowledge that there's ultimately something off with you. I don't want to say wrong.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
something off with you that you do this, right? So you need to figure out what that is so you don't keep doing it.
Exactly. That you need to stop letting that part of you run your show. And when you have to be confronted, you have to be confronted with it and you have to accept responsibility for the fact that you're letting this, you know, low frequency kind of shadow consciousness make your decisions for you. That those parts of you that think the least of you, those, you know, least the parts of you that has the least confidence, the parts of you that are the least aware of your value, you know, though that's what's running your show. And if you don't want to keep having the same uh different versions of the same mistake happening again and again, like you said, it looks different on the surface, but it's the same story underneath. That's where the personal work comes in, and I'm sure that's what you do in your coaching. I know it's
Yeah,
what I
yeah.
do
The
in mine,
personal
right?
work though has to be smart. It's actually it's hard work, but it has to be smart work.
Yeah,
And what I mean by that is changing what you're attracted to, I think is one of the most difficult things to do in
that's
life
fascinating.
because that's what you ultimately have to do.
Yeah.
I used to joke about this. I used to joke about this in saying that I used to just like the woman who wore the red dress at 10 in the morning. This was
Hmm.
maybe it's a little bit old fashioned or a little
Yeah, yeah,
sexist,
yeah.
right? Like, you know, it's a summer day and the woman's walking down the street in red
Hmm.
heels, red high heels, and a red
Yeah,
dress. You know, that's not the first look. Not that there's anything wrong with that. You know, I don't want to come off
yeah.
as being like
No.
weird about it, but this is like, you know, from a man, this woman's trouble, right? This woman's probably going to be
Yeah,
trouble. Okay. Okay. You know, it's a work day and she looks like she's dressed to head
yeah,
to the disco, you know, and
yeah,
we, right. And this is probably not the, you know, you should be looking for other qualities to be
yes,
attracted to.
yeah,
And, you know, and if she happens to look good in a red dress, okay, that's all good too.
yeah, yeah,
But, you know, the sort of this first thing, I use that metaphorically a little bit to sort of change, you know, don't look for trouble, right? Don't be
yeah.
attracted to trouble. And that's really, really what it comes down to. The other thing that I tell people a lot is that I think a mistake that people make a lot in entering relationships is they think that they can ignore things that happened in a person's past.
Mm.
Okay, and I'm going to turn this camera on myself. Okay, so if I were a woman, trust me, and I'm as far from a woman as it gets, but if I were a woman and I were considering dating Matt Sweetwood, I would be like, this guy's a two-time loser. Okay, he's married two, he says two difficult women. I won't
Yeah,
get into it. I don't want to
yeah,
spoil
yeah,
the story. Difficult women, but we need to take a careful look at that before we get involved with him.
yeah,
Okay. We definitely need to do that. And he has this other, you know, other stuff going on. We
yeah,
need to, so you don't ignore it. You don't be like, oh, he's different now. He's changed.
yeah,
That was the past. It was
yeah,
them. No,
yeah,
no, 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 no. You need to
yeah,
look at everything.
yeah,
So when like I said, I coach guys all the time. And you know, I have one client who just likes everything meticulously neat. He can't function if things aren't, and by the way, I'm a little like that too, just
yeah,
for what it's worth. So he can't function. And I'm like, well, if you meet a woman and you go in her car and there's McDonald's things sitting in the back seat, that's your life, man.
yeah,
That's your life. It's not going to change. She's not going to like all of a sudden magically. I'm using a very simple example,
yeah,
but
yeah. It's
you look at
true.
her past, right? I talk about this. One of the biggest things that I do is actually I help guys date.
Nice.
I'm actually about to set up my Twitter and do a subscription on Twitter. I have a lot of
Yeah, yeah,
followers on
yeah.
there,
Great.
stuff where I'm going to actually coach guys to do this. And one of the things I always say is you study everything. You try to understand the person because that's the person they're going to be. And if that works for you, great. If it doesn't work for you, then don't expect the person to change. Don't be ignoring things that happened in the past. You know, the big joke is that you meet the woman whose 3 husbands accidentally died,
Yeah.
right? Right. Right.
Yeah.
Cause of death unclear. You know,
Unclear. Yeah.
there, right?
Unknown. Yeah.
And you marry her, I'm going to tell you, you
Yeah.
know, you're going to have trouble getting life insurance. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, obviously we're being funny about it, but, you know, that's really what it's about. You look at a person, you look at the whole person, you look at their good parts, you look at their bad parts or their difficult parts. I don't, bad, good, different, whatever,
Yeah.
the parts that you don't like, and just understand that you're getting the whole package. And if you can live with the whole package, that's great. And nobody's
Yeah.
perfect. Everybody's got their stuff about them, but have a realistic view. And as you get older, it can't be puppy love that drives you or the red dress. It has
Yeah.
to be a much deeper, more complicated understanding.
Oh, I agree completely. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you giving us your time.
No, it's been my pleasure. I love it. I mean, these are all my favorite topics, mostly me. You know, one of my favorite topics. Is that a healthy amount of narcissism or not? I want to
Yes,
know.
it is.
Okay, it's good. I want to know if I was over the line.
Yes, it
Right?
is. No, no, that was great. And of course, I will link your book in the show notes of this
Right.
episode, and everybody should read it. It's a very good read.
And I can be found at M Sweetwood everywhere: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, everything at M Sweetwood. I was an early adopter, so I got M Sweetwood
Great.
everywhere. That's right. And I will share the show, of course, all over the
Awesome.
place. And it was a
Awesome.
pleasure. The pleasure was all mine.
Thank you for being here. That's all for today. I hope you'll check out the Undeletable Dad YouTube channel. And you can also find some thought pieces from me on our LinkedIn page as well. I can be reached at tracy@undeletabledad.com. Thanks for listening, and your kids thank you too.